In the year 1897, British soldiers forced their way into the ancient city of Benin. What they discovered inside stopped them in their tracks. Bronze sculptures of such artistic perfection that European scholars refused to believe Africans could have created them. Palaces stretching for miles, roads wider than anything in London. A civilization so advanced, so sophisticated, that it challenged everything the colonial powers believed about Africa. But here's what they don't teach you in school. Benin was not alone. 600 miles to the northwest, another empire had already reigned supreme for over 4 centuries. The Oyo Empire, a military superpower that commanded cavalry forces larger than most European armies. An economic giant that controlled trade routes stretching across West Africa. A political system so complex it would inspire modern concepts of checks and balances. These weren't primitive kingdoms waiting to be civilized. These were world powers, and their stories reveal a truth that was deliberately buried. Africa didn't need saving. Africa was thriving. This is the hidden history of the Oyo and Benin empires. For centuries, the narrative about pre-colonial Africa has been controlled by those who conquered it. We were told that Africa had no history before European contact. No complex societies, no sophisticated governance, no achievements worth remembering. But the archaeological evidence tells a radically different story. Today, we are going to explore 2 of West Africa's most powerful empires, the Oyo Empire and the Kingdom of Benin. These weren't small tribal societies. These were vast organized states with populations in the millions, armies that numbered in the tens of thousands, and political systems that rivaled anything in Europe or Asia. We'll journey through their rise to power in the forests and savannas of what is now Nigeria. We'll witness their golden ages when art, culture, and commerce flourished. We'll examine their complex governmental systems, their military innovations, and their economic dominance. But most importantly, we'll uncover how these empires resisted colonialism, how they were ultimately dismantled, and why their stories were systematically erased from global history. By the end of this documentary, you will understand why the colonizers feared these empires. You'll see why they had to destroy not just the political structures, but the very memory of African greatness. Because remembering Oyo and Benin means confronting an uncomfortable truth. The African dark continent narrative was always a lie designed to justify conquest. Let's begin where these empires began, in the heart of West Africa, centuries before any European ever set foot on their shores. One picture, West Africa in the 14th century. This is not the Africa of colonial imagination, empty, wild, uncivilized. This is a region already ancient with human activity, crisscrossed by trade routes thousands of years old, home to cities that had risen and fallen before Rome was even founded. The region we're focusing on encompasses modern-day southern Nigeria, stretching from the Atlantic coast inland to the Savanna grasslands. The geography here creates 2 distinct zones, and this division would shape 2 very different kinds of power. To the south, you have the tropical rainforest belt, dense jungle, heavy rainfall, humid conditions. The Great Forest extends from the coast northward for about 200 miles. Rivers cut through this green expanse, the Niger Delta, the Benin River, countless tributaries creating natural highways through the vegetation. To the north, the forest gradually gives way to woodland savanna, more open territory, Guinea grass growing head-high, scattered trees providing shade. This is cavalry country where horses can thrive and mounted warriors can charge across open ground. These 2 geographical zones would give birth to 2 different imperial models. The forest would nurture Benin, a kingdom built on artistic excellence, forest resources, and control of southern trade routes. The Savanna would forge Oyo, a cavalry empire built on military might and control of northern trade networks. When these empires rose to prominence, the world looked very different from today. The year is approximately 1300 CE. The Mali Empire under Mansa Musa dominates the Western Sahel, and its gold making it perhaps the wealthiest state on earth. Great Zimbabwe stands in southeastern Africa, a stone city of remarkable architecture. The Swahili city-states control East African trade with the Islamic world and beyond. This is Africa's classical age, a period of empire building, cultural flowering, and economic expansion that would continue for centuries. Understanding these empires requires understanding the peoples who built them. The Kingdom of Benin was built by the Edo people, master bronze casters who had lived in the forest regions for millennia. The Oyo Empire was built by the Yoruba people, one of West Africa's largest and most culturally influential ethnic groups, with a unique civilization built around city-states. Both peoples had sophisticated religious systems. They believed in a supreme creator God, beneath whom existed a pantheon of orishas or deities, each controlling different aspects of life and nature. Ancestors played a crucial role, serving as intermediaries between the living and the divine. Religion wasn't separate from politics. It was woven into every aspect of governance, law, and social organization. Before we dive into the political histories, we need to understand what made these regions wealthy enough to support large-scale states. Agriculture formed the foundation, but the real wealth came from trade. West Africa sat at the intersection of multiple trade networks. Trans-Saharan routes brought salt, textiles, and horses from North Africa and the Islamic world, exchanging them for gold, ivory, cola nuts, and later enslaved people. The military technology of this era shaped how power was exercised. In the forest regions, fighting took place on foot. The dense vegetation made cavalry impossible. Warriors fought with spears, machetes, bows, and arrows, and shields. In the Savanna regions, the horse changed everything. Cavalry could strike fast, cover great distances, and dominate infantry forces. But horses came at a cost. They had to be imported from the north, as the tsetse-fly in forest regions killed them. Maintaining a cavalry force required wealth, expertise, and continuous trade relationships with northern suppliers. Both regions had metallurgical traditions. Iron smelting and blacksmithing provided the weapons and tools that made organized warfare possible. Benin's bronze casting tradition demonstrated sophisticated metalworking knowledge that would create some of the world's greatest art. With this geographical, cultural, and economic foundation in place, we can now turn to the empires themselves. Two different paths to power. Two different models of African state building. At the heart of the Benin Empire stood one figure, the Oba. This wasn't just a king in the European sense. The Oba was a divine ruler, a living God, the spiritual and temporal center of the universe for his people. His power was absolute in theory, though in practice it was balanced by complex institutions. The dynasty that we'll focus on begins with Oba Ewad the Great, who ruled approximately from 1440 to 1473. Before Ewara, Benin was already an established kingdom, but he transformed it into an empire. Surrounding the Oba were the palace chiefs, known as the Uzama, hereditary nobles who claimed descent from the original founders of the kingdom. They held significant power, particularly in choosing new Obas. Then came the town chiefs, appointed by the Oba himself from among commoners who had distinguished themselves. The Iyoba, or Queen Mother, held her own power center. She maintained her own palace, controlled her own villages, and served as a crucial advisor to the Oba. The position was established by Oba Ezigi in the early 16th century to honor his mother Idia, who had helped him win a succession war. What made Benin unique among African empires was its extraordinary artistic tradition, organized through craft guilds. The Bronze Casters Guild worked exclusively for the palace, creating the famous Benin bronzes that would later astound European audiences. These weren't primitive artifacts, they were sophisticated lost wax castings that rivaled anything produced in Renaissance Europe. Now we shift northward to Oyo, where power was structured very differently. The ruler of Oyo bore the title Ala-Afin, meaning owner of the palace. Like the Oba of Benin, the Ala-Afin was considered semi-divine, but the Ala-Afin's power, while immense, was more constrained by constitutional checks than the Obas. The Oyomesi were a council of 7 high chiefs who served as the kingmakers and the primary check on royal power. These weren't merely advisors, they held real power. The Oyomesi could reject an Ala-Afin's decisions. More dramatically, they could order an Ala-Afin to commit ritual suicide if they determined he had failed in his duties or lost the favor of the gods. The leader of the Oyomesi was the Bashorun, essentially a prime minister. The Bashorun commanded the army when the Ala-Afin did not personally lead it. This constitutional structure created a fascinating balance of power. The Ala-Afin held religious authority and controlled the vast palace bureaucracy. The Oyomesi held military power and the ultimate sanction of removal. Oyo's true distinctive feature was its cavalry. The Are Onakakanfo was the supreme military commander, appointed by the Ala-Afin but required to live outside the capital. This position came with a harsh rule. The Are Onakakanfo was forbidden to return to the capital except in victory. If he lost a major battle, he was expected to commit suicide. The cavalry itself was divided into specialized units. Heavy cavalry armed with spears and protected by quilted armor. Light cavalry serving as scouts and skirmishers. Mounted archers who could fire from horseback. By its peak, Oyo could field 10,000 mounted warriors, the largest cavalry force in West African history. By the late 15th century, a new set of actors entered the West African stage: European merchants. Portuguese traders first, followed by Dutch, British, French, and others. Initially, these Europeans were supplicants, not conquerors. They built trading posts on the coast only with permission from African rulers. They paid customs duties. They negotiated as partners, not masters. In Benin, European traders dealt with designated officials who controlled coastal access. Europeans seeking to trade with Benin had to present gifts, observe proper protocols, and accept Benin's terms. Both empires developed sophisticated merchant classes who operated the long-distance trade networks. These weren't small-time traders. The wealthiest merchants commanded resources that rivaled minor nobles. They employed large numbers of people, owned significant property, and wielded considerable political influence. With these key figures and groups established, the divine rulers, the aristocratic counselors, the military commanders, the skilled artisans, the merchants, and the foreign traders, we can now turn to the chronological story of how these empires rose, flourished, and eventually faced the challenge of European colonialism. The story of Benin begins in mythology. According to oral tradition, the Edo people sent a delegation to Ile-Ife, the holy city of the Yoruba, requesting a prince to establish a new dynasty. The result was Eweka I, who became the first Oba of the new dynasty around 1180 CE. But it was Oba Ewar the Great, around 1440, whose reign would transform Benin from a regional kingdom into a sophisticated empire. Ewara rebuilt Benin City according to a grand plan. He ordered the construction of massive earthwork walls and moats that would eventually encircle the city. Modern archaeology has revealed that the Benin Wars formed the largest earthwork complex in the world, stretching for over 16,000 kilometers. When all the connected sections are measured, they required moving more earth than the Great Pyramid of Giza. Within these walls, Ewuare laid out broad avenues in a grid pattern. He expanded the royal palace into a vast complex of courtyards, apartments, galleries, and ceremonial spaces. European visitors in later centuries would compare Benin City favorably to Amsterdam or Lisbon. Ewuare also established the tradition of royal bronze casting. He commissioned magnificent bronze plaques to cover the palace pillars, depicting historical events, battles, and ceremonial occasions. These bronzes served as visual records of royal history and expressions of royal power. While Benin was flourishing in the forest, Oyo was struggling in the Savanna. In the late 15th century, Oyo faced invasion by the Nupe kingdom from the northeast. The Nupe had cavalry, Oyo did not. The result was catastrophic. The Nupe overran Oyo, forcing the Alaafin and his people into exile. But the Oyo people in exile learned crucial lessons. They learned about cavalry warfare from the Bogo people who hosted them. They established trade connections that would allow them to acquire horses. They developed military tactics suited to Savanna warfare. Around 1535, the Oyo people returned transformed. They now possessed cavalry forces trained and equipped to fight on the open grasslands. The returning Oyo army recaptured their homeland and immediately launched a campaign of expansion that would continue for 2 centuries. The cavalry made the difference. Oyo developed the largest cavalry force in West African history. No army in the forest regions could stand against them in open battle. Even powerful kingdoms had to acknowledge Oyo's supremacy or face devastating raids. In 1485, Portuguese ships reached the Benin coast. The early relationship was one of diplomatic equals. Benin sent ambassadors to Portugal. Portugal sent missionaries. Trade developed, but on Benin's terms. Initially, trade focused on pepper, ivory, and palm oil, but soon a darker trade began: enslaved people. Here's where Benin's story diverges from many African kingdoms. In the 1520s, under Oba Esigi, Benin largely withdrew from the slave trade. The kingdom found the slave trade destabilizing and not as profitable as other commerce. This decision had profound consequences. It meant Benin avoided the economic dependency on the slave trade that would corrupt and ultimately destroy many African states. The 16th century represented Benin's apex of power and cultural achievement. European visitors left detailed accounts describing a city with straight, broad avenues, some as wide as any in Europe. The palace complex stretching for miles, markets bustling with trade, a population they estimated at hundreds of thousands, making Benin City one of the largest cities in Africa. The 17th century saw Oyo transform from a regional power into West Africa's dominant empire. Under successive Alaafins, Oyo launched campaigns in all directions. They conquered the kingdom of Alada on the coast. They forced numerous Yoruba kingdoms to accept tributary status. By the mid-17th century, Oyo controlled the largest empire in Yoruba land's history. The capital, Oyo-Ile, grew into a major urban center with an estimated population of 100,000 or more. The empire's reach extended about 400 miles east to west and 200 miles north to south. Oyo developed a complex system for controlling its empire. Provincial capitals were governed by ajele, administrators appointed by the Alaafin. The road system was crucial, allowing cavalry to deploy rapidly to suppress rebellions. The tributary system was carefully calibrated. Vassal kings retained their thrones and local authority as long as tribute was paid. The relationship with the Kingdom of Dahomey illuminates how Oyo's system worked. In 1726, Oyo cavalry invaded Dahomey after it gained control of important coastal ports. The Dahomeyan army, which included famous female warrior units, fought bravely but couldn't stop the cavalry. Oyo imposed tributary status but didn't destroy Dahomey. This arrangement worked for decades, but it contained seeds of destruction. Dahomey's economy became increasingly dependent on the Atlantic slave trade. Moreover, Dahomey slowly built up its military capabilities and acquired firearms from European traders. While Oyo was expanding dramatically, Benin was following a different trajectory. The 17th and 18th centuries saw Benin maintain its power but adopt a more conservative, inward-looking stance. The kingdom continued to control its core territories and maintained its cultural sophistication, but Benin increasingly restricted European access to preserve its independence and cultural integrity. By the late 18th century, Oyo's political system was breaking down. In the 1770s, Bashorun Gaha seized effective control of the empire. He reduced a series of Alafins to powerless figureheads. Between 1754 and 1774, Gaha deposed or killed 4 Alafins. In 1774, Alafin Abiodun managed to rally support and overthrow Gaha. But the damage was done. The crisis had revealed fundamental weakness. When the checks and balances broke down, there was no mechanism to restore order except violence. Meanwhile, the Atlantic slave trade was fundamentally transforming West African economics. By the late 18th century, European demand for enslaved Africans had reached unprecedented levels. The economic incentives to participate in the slave trade became overwhelming, creating perverse incentives that militarized society and broke down trust. In the early 19th century, a religious revolution swept across the West African Savanna. The Fulani Jihad, led by Usman Danfodio. By 1809, Danfodio's forces had conquered the Hausa kingdoms and established the Sokoto Caliphate. The jihadist armies then turned southward. Oyo's northern provinces came under attack. The empire that had once dominated the region now found itself on the defensive. The cavalry that had once seemed invincible now struggled to defend even core territories. The final collapse came swiftly. In 1817, Alaafin Aole faced a catastrophic situation. The Oyo Messi presented him with the parrot eggs, ordering him to commit suicide. According to tradition, Aole cursed Oyo before taking his own life. The empire disintegrated. In 1825, Fulani forces attacked and burned Old Oyo itself. The Alafin and his people fled southward. What followed was chaos. The Yoruba civil wars. Former parts of the Oyo Empire fought each other for supremacy. These wars would continue for decades, creating exactly the weakness that European colonizers would exploit. While Oyo collapsed, Benin endured, but it too faced mounting pressures. In the early 19th century, Britain was pushing to end the Atlantic slave trade. Benin shifted focus to palm oil production. But European merchants wanted direct access, lower prices, and favorable treaties. Backed by military power, Benin resisted these pressures. The Obas maintained strict control over European access and refused to sign treaties that would compromise sovereignty. Through the mid-19th century, Benin maintained its independence, but it was an island of African autonomy in a region increasingly dominated by European power. In 1884 to 1885, European powers met in Berlin to divide Africa among themselves. No Africans attended, lines were drawn on maps, territories were assigned, the scramble for Africa was formalized, Britain claimed authority over the region around Benin. Throughout the 1890s, British officials pressured Benin to sign treaties that would make it a protectorate. Oba Ovonramwen refused. He maintained that Benin was an independent kingdom and would remain so. In January 1897, a British delegation led by James Phillips decided to force the issue. Despite warnings about a sacred period, Phillips marched to Benin City. His party was killed. The British response was overwhelming and brutal. They assembled a military force of 1,200 men equipped with modern weapons, Maxim guns, artillery, and rifles against Benin's muskets and traditional weapons. In February 1897, British forces advanced on Benin City. The Edo warriors fought bravely, but it was a technological mismatch. The Maxim guns could fire 600 rounds per minute. The British forces captured and burned Benin City. They deliberately destroyed the palace complex. They looted thousands of bronze plaques and sculptures, ivory carvings, and other treasures. They took this to England, where they were sold to museums and private collectors. Oba Ovonramwen fled, but was eventually captured. The British deposed him and sent him into exile, where he died in 1914. Benin's independence, maintained for over 6 centuries, ended in violence and plunder. The looting of Benin's treasures had profound consequences. When the Benin bronzes arrived in Europe, they caused a sensation. The artistic sophistication was undeniable. This created a problem for colonial ideology. European scholars invented absurd theories, claiming Africans couldn't have made them. The British conquest of Yoruba land was more gradual but equally complete. The Yoruba civil wars had exhausted the region. The British positioned themselves as mediators. By 1900, Britain formally declared the protectorate of southern Nigeria. By 1914, the diverse peoples of the region were subjects of the British Empire. The standard colonial narrative portrayed African societies as primitive and lacking governmental sophistication. But the reality of Oyo and Benin reveals something very different. Consider Oyo's constitutional system. The Oyo Messi could force an Alafin to commit suicide if he failed in his duties. This concept that rulers can be held accountable and removed through institutional processes is often presented as a European innovation. But Oyo had developed similar principles independently centuries before European contact. The balance between the Ala Afin's religious authority and the Oyo Messi's political power created a system of checks and balances. Neither could act alone. This prevented the emergence of absolute tyranny. Benin developed different mechanisms for similar ends. The tension between hereditary nobles and appointed officials created competing power centers. The Iyoba could influence decisions independently. The craft guilds held economic power that gave them political leverage. These weren't primitive despotisms. These were sophisticated political systems that managed competing interests and created mechanisms for succession and accountability. Another hidden element is the role of women in these empires. The Iyoba of Benin was a major political figure controlling her own palace and resources. The first Iyoba, Idia, literally helped her son win a civil war. In Oyo market, women controlled much of the commercial economy through powerful guilds. Western education and literacy are often used as markers of civilization. But Oyo and Benin had sophisticated intellectual traditions. The Ifa divination system required Babalawa priests to memorize thousands of verses containing history, medicine, philosophy, and practical wisdom. This oral literature was vast and complex. Benin's bronze plaques weren't merely decorative, they were historical records that could be read by those trained in their symbolic language. The organization of craft guilds represented systematic technical education. Both empires operated sophisticated tax systems and economic regulation. This wasn't simple village economy. This was commercial capitalism, African style, with division of labor, specialized production, market systems, and long-distance trade requiring credit systems and commercial contracts. Perhaps the most hidden element is that the erasure of these achievements was deliberate. Colonial powers needed to justify their conquest. If Africans had sophisticated civilizations, colonialism couldn't be justified as bringing civilization to the uncivilized. So the evidence was suppressed. The Benin bronzes were locked away. Oral traditions were dismissed. Archaeological investigation was minimal. The very questions scholars asked were shaped by assumptions of African inferiority. Both empires employed resistance strategies beyond military confrontation. Benin's restriction of European access was economic resistance. By controlling trade, Benin maintained sovereignty even as a European power grew. This diplomatic resistance delayed colonization for decades. When the British conquered Benin, cultural resistance didn't end. The Edo people preserved their practices, oral traditions, and social structures even under colonial rule. They maintained the institution of the Oba even when reduced to ceremonial status. Similarly, the Yoruba maintained their language, religion, and cultural practices. This cultural resistance ensured that when independence came, these peoples had strong identities and traditions to build upon. The colonizers could conquer the political systems, but they couldn't completely erase the cultures. The Oyo and Benin empires fundamentally shaped modern Nigeria's political landscape. When Britain created Nigeria in 1914, they were artificially joining peoples who had never been united. But the Yoruba and Edo shared experience with large-scale state organization that would prove crucial. After independence in 1960, the Yoruba political elite championed federalism, dividing power between central and regional governments. This concept had roots in the old Yoruba city-state system and Oyo's tributary empire model. Even today, traditional rulers, Obas in Benin, the Alafin in Oyo, hold no official political power but command enormous cultural authority. Their immediate disputes maintain cultural traditions and provide legitimacy. Politicians quote traditional rulers because they represent continuity with pre-colonial sovereignty. The artistic traditions of Benin continue to influence global art. The Benin bronzes became world famous, influencing European modernist artists and proving African art was sophisticated. Today, contemporary Nigerian artists draw on this heritage. The ongoing campaign for repatriation has become a global cause, with museums finally beginning to return pieces to Nigeria. Yoruba cultural traditions similarly endure. Yoruba religious practices have experienced a global revival. The Orisha traditions developed during Oyo's era are now practiced worldwide, particularly in the African diaspora in the Americas. Perhaps the most important legacy is what these empires teach us about African agency and resistance. Oyo and Benin were not passive victims. They were active agents building empires, developing complex systems, creating artistic masterpieces, and conducting sophisticated diplomacy. When Europeans arrived, these empires engaged on initially equal terms. Even when European power grew overwhelming, resistance continued. The eventual conquest required overwhelming military force and technological advantage. These empires didn't fall because Africans were inferior. They fell because industrialized European powers brought Maxim guns to fight against muskets and spears. Understanding this is crucial for how Nigerians and Africans generally understand their own history. The narrative shifts from "we were primitive and needed civilization" to "we had sophisticated civilizations that were violently destroyed." Beyond Nigeria, these empires have global significance. They prove that complex state organization, sophisticated art, and economic development were not European monopolies. They demonstrate that the scramble for Africa was the violent conquest of established civilizations by technologically superior invaders. For the African diaspora, these empires provide connection to heritage. Many enslaved people came from these regions. Understanding that their ancestors came from sophisticated civilizations changes how diaspora peoples understand their identities. The legacies remain contested and relevant today. The fight for repatriation continues. The question of how traditional institutions fit into modern democracy continues. The memory of pre-colonial greatness informs Pan-African movements. These aren't just ancient stories. They are living legacies shaping how millions understand themselves, their cultures, and their place in the world. So what is the big lesson here? What should we take away from the story of Oyo and Benin? At the most basic level, this story demolishes the lie of African primitiveness. These were sophisticated civilizations. They had complex governments with checks and balances. They had professional armies. They had vibrant the artistic traditions. They had the economic systems that participated in global trade networks. They had philosophical and spiritual traditions that provided meaning and order to people's lives. When Europeans claimed they were bringing civilization to Africa, they were lying. Civilization already existed. What they brought was conquest, exploitation, and cultural destruction. But the lesson goes deeper than just correcting historical lies. These empires show us that there are multiple paths to civilization. Oyo and Benin developed political systems, artistic traditions, and economic structures that didn't look like European ones, but that worked for their contexts. The Yoruba city-state system was different from European nation-states, but it was no less sophisticated. Benin's bronze casting was different from European artistic traditions, but it was no less beautiful or technically accomplished. The colonial assumption was that there was one right way to organize society, one right way to create art, one right way to govern, and that way was European. Everything else was primitive, backwards, inferior. But Oyo and Benin proved that assumption wrong. Human beings in different environments with different resources and challenges will create different solutions. Diversity of approach is a strength, not a weakness. There is no single civilization. There are civilizations, plural, each valid in its own context. Another crucial lesson is about the nature of conquest and historical memory. These empires didn't fall because they were weak or inferior. They fell because they faced technologically superior invaders at a moment of internal weakness. Oyo was torn apart by civil war and external invasion before Europeans colonized the fragments. Benin resisted for decades but eventually faced Maxim guns with muskets. Technology and timing matter in history. The fact that one civilization conquers another doesn't prove moral or cultural superiority. It often just proves that one side had better weapons at a particular moment, and yet the conquerors write the history. The British, who burned Benin City and looted its treasures, claimed they were ending barbarism. They portrayed the Obas as tyrants and Benin as backwards. They ignored or minimized the sophistication, the artistic achievement, the political complexity. This pattern repeated across Africa. Conquerors justified their violence by portraying their victims as primitive and savage. And for over a century, these lies became accepted truth in much of the world. Recovering the real history of empires like Oyo and Benin is therefore an act of justice. It's about giving voice to people who were deliberately silenced. It's about honoring achievements that were deliberately forgotten. It's about telling the truth after generations of lies. But perhaps the most profound lesson is about resistance and resilience. These empires fell. Their political power was destroyed. Their territories were colonized. Their peoples were subjected to foreign rule by conventional measures they lost. And yet the Yoruba people endure. The Edo people endure. Their languages are spoken by millions. Their cultural traditions continue. Their art inspires new generations. The institutions of the Aleafin and Oba survive, transformed but unbroken. The memory of empire persists. This is a different kind of victory, not a military victory, but a cultural and spiritual one. The colonizers could conquer the kingdoms, but they couldn't destroy the peoples or completely erase their cultures. This resilience matters. It means that when independence came, these peoples had strong identities and traditions to build upon. It means that today, Nigerians can look back with pride on their ancestors' achievements. It means that the African diaspora can claim connection to sophisticated civilizations, not just victimhood and enslavement. The story of Oyo and Benin is ultimately a story about human dignity and the impossibility of completely destroying a people's spirit. Every bronze mask that is returned to Nigeria is a small victory. Every student who learns the real history of these empires is a correction of colonial lies. Every time someone says Africa had great civilizations before colonialism, they are honoring the memory of Oyo and Benin. These empires matter not just as historical curiosities, but as proof that African peoples have always been creative, capable, and fully human. That shouldn't need proving, but after centuries of dehumanization, the proof matters. The kingdoms fell, the memory endures, and in that endurance lies hope. Not just for understanding the past, but for building a future where all civilizations are recognized as equally valid expressions of human creativity and achievement. The story of the Oyo and Benin empires is one of many hidden histories across the African continent. From the stone cities of Great Zimbabwe to the scholarly traditions of Timbuktu, from the coastal kingdoms of the Swahili to the highland civilizations of Ethiopia, Africa's past is filled with achievements that challenge everything we were taught about history. But these stories remain hidden only because they haven't been widely told. And that's where you come in. If this documentary opened your eyes to African history you never learned in school, hit that subscribe button. We're going to keep uncovering these hidden histories, one empire, one kingdom, one achievement at a time. Like this video, if you want to see more content about pre-colonial African civilizations, leave a comment telling us which African empire or kingdom you want us to cover next. The Songhai Empire, the Kingdom of Congo, the Ashanti, Great Zimbabwe. Let us know. Share this video with someone who needs to know that Africa's history is rich, complex, and worthy of study. Every share helps correct the false narratives that have dominated for too long. Next time, we'll explore another chapter in Africa's hidden history. We'll uncover another story of achievement, resistance, and resilience that's been deliberately buried. Because remembering is resistance, knowledge is power, and the truth about Africa's past changes everything about how we understand the present. This is Africa Hidden History. The story continues.